America. My name is Osei-Frimpong. I come to you live every Friday. And today we're going to talk about the University of California system banning the SAT for uses in scholarship information and admissions. All right, so one would think, the standardized tests are bad. This will help people of color. And I don't think you understand enough about the University of California demographic and the pressures that a place like UC Berkeley feels. And I went to UC Berkeley, and I was one of the few Negroes there, especially I think black guys who don't play a sport or are like, I think they got confused and let me in because they might have looked at my name and assumed that I was from Africa as opposed to like Los Angeles. So there aren't too many black guys there at all. So what there are a lot of Asians, which is kind of cool for me, because I like Asians, and I went to a high school that was predominantly white, so it was nice to see this is the demographics of Berkeley at the time. Now, right? So I just grabbed this off of the website: 26% white, 34% Asian. But the non-resident alien are also Asian. So it's ethnicity unknown, probably Asian too. So there's a way in which you walk on Berkeley and you're like, wow, this place is not a lot of black people, but it's not white. This is not white kids go to Santa Cruz and Santa Barbara. They do not. They stay away from Berkeley, and they can't get in. They can't get in because they don't score as well as the Asians do on the SAT. And I have the SAT information right here. Let me just bring that up. So you can say, well, no, we've been trying to dethrone standardized tests for a long time. Yeah, but it didn't matter when it was about getting black people in. When it was an issue that standardized tests were disproportionately hurting black people, nobody cared. We were like, well, we have to keep it objective for the sake of meritocracy. Now the standardized tests are overwhelmingly nixing white kids. We're like, well, we need to look at the whole student. And it turns out that the Asian students who are in California are better are more serious about these tests than white people. Now, I will say that UC Berkeley tried something like this in the aughts. In 2006, the University of California system led the push to put idioms on the SAT, right? So idioms on the SAT because, white kids were getting beat by Asians and we had to find a way. We couldn't get rid of the SAT, but we had to change the test so that white kids, and it wasn't enough because it turns out that the Asian kids then learned idioms. So gotcha, suckers. So what you're dealing with was Wilt Chamberlain. And why do I say what you're dealing with was Wilt Chamberlain? I just found out that apparently in the 70s, Wilt Chamberlain, he changed the games. I didn't know that they instituted the 3-second rule because of Wilt Chamberlain, goaltending mostly because of Wilt Chamberlain. I didn't know that he actually fundamentally changed the game. And so Asian immigrants kind of fundamentally changed the ideological structure and underpinning of white supremacy. It had to change to admit, it couldn't be we have to be objective. No, it wasn't about that anymore. Asians beat you on that. The test was never objective anyway. It was about how you could study for the test. I actually like having the SAT on the admissions because I'm pretty good at standardized tests, and I don't like teachers. That's not true. I don't feel called to kiss teachers' butt enough to do the kind of things that one would have to do to get all A's. So I like the fact that I can just take a test. I can study for a test. I can't write my own letter of recommendation. I can't grade myself, but I can take a test. So that's why I actually like the SAT as a test. And I'm going to mourn for it being gone. Because I can tell you one thing. While people will talk about this being good for the Negro, the SAT being gone, I can tell you one thing. In 10 years or in 7 years, Berkeley's not going to be merely 26% white. And I'm going to go a little bit more into detail about the dynamics, because if you don't know the dynamics of Northern California or Berkeley in general, well, I think UCLA too, then you don't understand why this was totally an anti-Asian attack. Getting rid of the SAT was completely an anti-Asian attack. It's got nothing to do with black people or Latinos. It's got everything to do with white people being outscored by Asians. And I will give you a little bit more historical context after the beat.
To the beat, y'all. Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and ain't no future in your front. To the beat, y'all. Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and ain't no future in your front.
So the black people will often get used. We get used for cover, right? So LBJ, and there's a big push for affirmative action announced at Howard, and this is for us, it's for black people. Turns out white women figured out a way to weaponize it, and they eat off affirmative action more than anybody else. They get the inheritance from their grandfather, and then, their husband puts a business in their name, and then they go get the government contracts. White women, by just about every objective measure, white women have eaten off of affirmative action better than everyone else combined. Like they won that game. So something that was made for us ended up getting mostly profiting white people, because it's all in the family. Patriarchy is a family relationship, and it's all about white supremacy in these United States. So it stays, in the white money and the white jobs and the white contracts still stay white. They just now go to the wives instead of the husbands. Right. So white women eating off affirmative action. Disability. I'm a fan of both affirmative action and disability accommodations. Who eats off of disability accommodations? White people who want a time and a half on standardized tests. Let me tell you, if you get time and a half on something like the LSAT, I've taken the LSAT and I did well because I'm good at standardized tests or whatever. But if you get time and a half on that test, you're not taking the same test. They're taking a qualitatively different test than everybody else who doesn't have an uncle as a doctor, or is not going to have their parents put them in front of a doctor for them to say the right words, for them to get tested with an accommodation so that they get time and a half on the test. Right? So time and a half on these standardized tests is a whole nother test. You're not taking the same test. You're not. You think you are. People tell you are, but you're not taking the same test. If you get time and a half on the ACT, if you get time and a half on a math test, if you get time and a half on the LSAT, you're not taking the same test, which is fine for what it is. But let's stop pretending that you're taking the same test. You're not. You're not. So disability accommodations have been and also, once again, disproportionately going to white people so that they can come close, but not quite. I have never once seen an Asian American, and I know heaps of Asian Americans, fill out the paperwork for a disability accommodation. I've never seen it. I've never seen I would like to see the data. I would like to see the data on Asian Americans filling out calling for a disability accommodation and getting time and a half on these standardized tests. It's not something they do. What they are doing right now is studying flashcards as we speak for the plot against them. And you have to understand that Asian America, it's a weird general category because it takes immigrants who came to the United States prior to 1965, which talking about refugees and treated like trash, to the post-65, the H-1B generation. And it turns out that half of Chinese immigrants to the United States come with a bachelor's degree, whereas 2% of native Chinese people have a bachelor's degree, a college degree, which means that we're not, and I suspect it's even harsher for the Southeast Asians, South Asian / Indian population, where I've met like I said, a ton of Indian Americans. I didn't realize until, I don't know, a few years ago that pretty much every single Indian American I know is from the top two castes. I know. Like they're from the top two castes. So we're getting the Asian immigrant population in the United States are like people who have been generationally used to treating their native population, the poor and the working class native population in their home countries, like trash, right? So like disposable. So, we come here, we offer them provisional whiteness. As long as you take up anti-blackness, most of them are like, sure, I can take up anti-blackness. Where's my McMansion? And what happens is that's fine. It's provisional whiteness though. And what white people did is they called and they want their whiteness back because Asian Americans were then beating white people at stuff that, non-provisional white people thought that there was theirs, right? So Asian Americans adopted provisional whiteness and got confused. They thought it was real whiteness. And I had a friend in Decatur who was telling me that Decatur is is a community in outside of Atlanta that's quickly being gentrified. And she was telling me that, look, every year I used to call the tax assessor's office and say, like, I'm having a hard time getting my income taxes together, property taxes together. Do you mind if we put me on a plan, or can I work something out? And the tax assessor's office would always work something out. Except about 3 years ago, the tax assessor's office was like, no, we're not working nothing out. You got to go. So what was the difference? Well, the difference is that area is gentrifying. And gentrifying means white people want their land back. So pretty much, and my friend was black. My friend, it felt like she was just, all this time she thought she owned the house, but she really didn't own the house. White people own the house, and white people called the county government and said, like, we want our house back. And now she's got to go because it was never actually meant for you. So you thought you were owned stuff, but it turns out you were only ever renting. This was always provisional. This is like the story I tell about Greenwood, the Tulsa massacre. Same thing happened in Memphis and New Orleans and Rosewood had happened. And when I talk about Greenwood, I'm talking about, Tulsa, but like in North Carolina, what was it? Wilmington had happened. Like anytime black people thought that they owned stuff, that white people, it was fine until white people wanted it back. And then they brought the guns and the tanks and they took it back. Like right now, anytime black people think that they can own and build stuff, some white guy will just come in and throw a lot of money and bribe who they need to bribe and buy it up or internally destabilize it. Which is why, white people aren't scared of black nationalism because they know that as long as it happens in these United States, they can always eminent domain it and just take it and take it for theirs. And but they are scared of critical race theory because they know that white terrorism can't actually sustain the truth about white terrorism. And it might actually, so critical race theory may actually implode whiteness because it's just going to tell the truth about the terrorist, like, sensibility that everybody else who's non-white, lives with. By the way, I was talking to a friend and, she's, upper class white lady. And she's like, white people don't have a concept of real talk. That's not something we don't have a real talk. And then I was like, yeah, because real talk is what black people have when they're not talking in a way that makes white people comfortable. like that's like real talk emerged as a response to like having to live in to keep white people comfortable. So there is no real talk in white people because they just have masks that they put on for each other, and then they have masks under masks, and it's just masks all the way down. And so they just constantly lie to each other, and they're constantly calibrated to make each other feel good, which is like completely abstracted from the truth. And it's just mask. And if you try to take all the masks off, at the community level, what you'll find out is just a community on pills and antidepressants because there's no there except like a bunch of lies. And so they're confused about the world and they're, might be meaningless. So what critical race theory might force them to handle the truth about themselves. And I think what white conservatives know, and I think white liberals know too, is that the truth about themselves might actually destabilize whiteness in a way that putative black nationalism can't. Right. So, and like the publicly acknowledged truth, because white people also know deep down that they're, terrorists, but it needs to be a publicly acknowledged truth where everybody like knows the terrorism of settler colonialism that is still with us, right? So I do this so that people don't get confused. I do this video so that people don't get confused about the racial justice of getting rid of the SAT when it's really just a white power grab. And there's and if you don't understand Northern California, here's a great little article by Anjali Ingetti. She wrote about white people fleeing suburbs. They're fleeing Asian ethno suburbs, right? Because they don't want little Tiffany and little Kimberly going to school and being made to feel bad because they get outscored and straight up beaten in all ways by, Jennifer. They get beaten in all ways by recent Asian immigrants, right? So it turns out that liberal whites are fleeing the good schools because the good schools have too many Asian students for their liking and they want their kids to feel good. So there is that. And like I said, if you're in someplace else in the United States, like I can tell you right now on this video, I'm going to get a lot of white guys in the comment section who go like, well, this isn't the case because Asians are outscoring whites all over the U.S. and this has nothing to do with California or Berkeley. No, this has everything to do with California and Berkeley, because while Asian students might be outscoring white students everywhere in the U.S., they're not a majority of flagship university populations in all places in the U.S., right? And that's what's doing the work. Like, Berkeley is not a white school. Like in any way, like pretty much you have to join. If you're white, you have to join, and you're white and you're kind of used to the perks of whiteness. You have to join the Greek system to get some semblance of it. The Greek system exists to give white people a place to go, so that they are comfortable whiting out loud, because like Berkeley doesn't necessarily do that. And right now I'm getting a picture because I think you guys are going to get a kick out of this. I'm getting a picture, and I say that's not the worst thing in the world. And people say, Amy, how could you be so pro standardized tests? Don't you know that standardized tests are racist? And I tell them, there is no way in hell that standardized tests are more racist than my teachers. Mind you, this is my junior high school. This is why I moved from LA proper to Orange County, Laguna Hills, in 7th grade. And this is the 8th grade band picture. This is my junior high school. So you have to understand that, I appreciated the non-whiteness of Berkeley. I also appreciated the SAT because my teachers in this environment were not exactly conducive to appreciating my genius. So I've made facetious. By the way, if you appreciate what I'm doing, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, because doing what I'm doing, depending on who you talk to, makes me down white unemployable. However, I think that I'm providing a service, and if you think that I'm providing a service too, trying to put fighting white people out loud takes a bit of courage and practice, and I'm trying to give you guys the tools in order to do this in your daily life. So send all this to your friends, and donate $5, $15, or $50 a month to the show, because I try to give you kind of interesting content. And I have the next few shows already planned out, and they're going to be rather outstanding. So you're going to be happy that you supported this, and you're going to want me to grow sooner rather than later, so that more people see the shows. Because right now, the mainstream narrative is that this is good for black people. This is not good for black people. Berkeley will not have significant numbers of black people. California itself is shedding black people. If it wanted to have black people, like, if California cared about black people, they would have done so many different policy 20 years ago, right? So I don't know who black is buying in California. Well, maybe it's some Nigerian immigrants, but what black person whose grandparents, who has 4 black grandparents, is buying in California right now? I don't know. I don't know. Or is moving to California to buy. I just, maybe they exist, but I know a lot of black people who are moving out. And so this is not about us, right? The number you see, we don't even have numbers on this graph. And that's not going to go up. The black people who go to Berkeley are football players, basketball players, athletes, track athletes, and random immigrants, and me. Every now and then you'll get one who kind of sneaks in because he can take a test and do whatever. So the school's going to fit its needs. The school's getting rid of the SAT so that it has space so the enrollment managers have more space to meet the needs of the university. And the needs of the university are not Negroes. Needs of the university is white money. While I was at university, I was through an accident of fortune, I was on a few ex officio committees, and one of them was Berkeley Foundation. So you go there and you meet a bunch of old moneyed UC Berkeley grads, and they're all white because white people give, and because they have so much. And some of them remarked about well, the school is different than it was back then. And the difference being it's got a lot of Asians. It's less white. So just know that policies that seem to be about us aren't really necessarily about us. They're not about our justice. And we have to actually take the narrative back. Because getting rid of the SAT it's like an interest conversion, interest convergence. Although it's not even in our interest because it's not going to help us because there's so few black people in Berkeley. So it's really just California whites' interest converging with national blacks and Latinos, because it's not going to affect blacks and Latinos in California. They'll still be at Berkeley in their rates. What it is going to tick up this 26% of white population at Berkeley, which is the most selective one. It'll get it up to 35 and 40, and we'll watch this 35% Asian population go down, which I don't think that's fair. And some people will say well, you should just have a lottery system for admissions, and I'm well, I guess, but what you should just do is just be more transparent about what public universities are for and their needs. Right? We need more black people going to the best schools and black descendants of slaves going to the best schools. That's a need for the nation. So forget lottery system. Just get black people and get them the best education, because that's what the nation needs. So somebody else said we should just ban all Ivy League schools from only people who are first generation college students can go to Ivy League schools. I think that's fine. Everyone else can go to Bowdoin. You can go to Grinnell. You can go to a different school. You just don't get to go to Harvard or Yale. For 20 years, only people who are first generation college students can go to those schools. I wouldn't actually have a problem with that. I think that would be good for everyone involved. So what I'm telling you is that we should be wary of policies that seem to be about us, are taught to us to be about us, are being touted as being about us, but are really just power grabs for white people. Affirmative action was one, disability accommodations was another, and now we're seeing the banning of the SAT being another one. It's not about us, not at UC, not at the University of California. And this didn't happen at the University of Kansas. This didn't happen at not even UT Austin. This didn't happen at University of Oklahoma, or University of Colorado, University of North Carolina, which has a very good system. And if they ban those tests at the University of North Carolina, it might actually help black students. But no, they did it at Berkeley, the one university of California, the one university system, one flagship university system at the flagship school that will actually, when you ban it, will help white kids, suburban middle-class white kids, because they don't have the stuff to not get outpaced by recent Asian immigrants and people who've been here since 1965, right? So that's what we're at right now, and I just don't want us to think this is about us, right? This is Asian. This is an anti-Asian policy, and it's not even anti-Asian; it's anti-elite Asian. So it's really elites. It's elite Asians versus elite whites. And I say they're elite Asians because the non-elite Asians are still in Asia, right? So this is elite Asians versus elite whites. And it's a war between them. And the elite Asians thought they had provisional whiteness, but white people called their politicians and took their whiteness back. They upped the rent. Asians thought they were renting to own or owned, and it turns out that white people upped the rent. The landlord of whiteness upped the rent on them. And, I don't know. I feel bad. I mean, this is why I think it's unjust. And I would actually be in support of the SAT. I wish the Asian, especially elite Asians, were better allies to black people, but they didn't come here to assimilate with the losing team. So, sorry, you thought you picked a side, and it turns out the side you picked doesn't really care about you as much, and definitely I don't know. So also, thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, let me scan chat real quickly to make sure someone didn't say anything provocative that I should blah blah. Just graduated from my black. There's only one black kid in my graduating class. Yeah, so. Teachers are more racist. Teachers are more racist than, thank you, Terry, for the $49. Teachers are more racist than the SAT. It's not that the SAT isn't racist. It's just that, in a white school, teachers are going to be more racist. And you know who's going to eat from this? I bet you, once again, this is one of those things that's going to work for white women more than anybody else. Because if it's just grades, I don't think anyone gets better grades than white women, because white women are teachers. And not only are white women teachers, a lot of school is just doing exactly what you're told because you're told to do it. And some people demographics are better in that than others for reasons, and believing in the system while pretending that you don't. So that's all I have to say about that. I hope you appreciate the show. I hope you share it around. Put this on your Facebook, on your Twitter feed, and I will see you next week. If you appreciate the work I do every week and you think that I should continue to do it because I'm giving you the quality of political knowledge and insight that will help you not squander your life and kind of rescue meaning from it, then go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, or make one enormous donations. I like the monthlies because it allows me to budget more, and that'll help me, with a marketing budget or getting better equipment that works all the time, because in a lot of ways, freedom means having equipment that works every time you turn it on. And I want to be a free Negro. So, if you like what I do, go to funkyacademic.com and contribute. Thanks often comes in the form of cash, and the site takes credit cards.